And then I turn to my final three wonderful authors and your wonderful books. Thank you so much for your patience. You've waited right to the end. And I'm delighted to be introducing your books. David, you represent Bible Society, and you, together with others, have created this gorgeous book, God's Story, a children's Bible in Pitjantjatjara. And then we have, this is quite hard to do actually sitting down, but here's is a beautiful book by Sarah, Priests of History, and thinking about stewarding the past well. And finally, last but not least, Modern Genre Theory. I actually really also like this cover, Andy, as well. It's very schmick. As well, thinking about genre and how it works and is relevant for biblical studies. Thank you so much for all three of these books. They're books that I think help us to look at texts afresh in new ways, and also harkens back to the heritage as well that we have in the tradition that we hold and value together. So let me start maybe with this volume. David, this book was the dream of an Indigenous woman who conceived of this before she passed away in 2022. Would you tell us a little bit about this story of how this book came about?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. So great to be here with you all. Yeah, look, this story is really about Nami. So Nami was serving as a translator on the Pitjantjatjara Bible Translation Project. She was actually visiting a Christian bookstore and was looking through the children's Bibles, and then kind of realised there's no books like this for our children. Nami was known as someone who loved children very much, and so her vision was for a book aimed at the Pitjantjatjara children that would help them understand and explore the Bible using traditional artwork and storytelling to convey the stories of the Bible. Like you said, sadly she passed away in 2022, but her community were determined to finish her dream, and now we have the GODAKU.
Yeah.
This completed book and the impact it's having now is a part of Nami's legacy.
Thanks so much, David. I'm just going to flick through this very briefly, and hopefully there'll be some images that come up as well on the screen for you, but it's a glorious book. And it really is a book where we're kind of looking over the shoulders of Pitjantjatjara Indigenous people as they teach their children. As you know, they use images in the same way that we use text to communicate their history. And so to have a Bible, as it were, it means that it's part of their history and their heritage, and they can teach it to their children in the ways that are the most relevant and the most helpful in images as well as in text. So it's a gorgeous, glorious book to learn from and to learn to read. And we have an image up on the screen, David. This is, obviously neither of us are Indigenous, and so we've been exploring this and looking over the shoulder and trying to figure it out. And we thought we might just share this image together with our audience. It is the Samaritan woman at the well with Jesus. But would you like to talk us through what is actually going on?
Yeah, I've been given the text to break this down. I was actually going to see if anyone would have guessed would have guessed the story. So the painting is obviously really stunning, but the imagery tells the story quite perfectly. At the center of the image is the well, which is deep with blue water necessary for life for the Samaritan woman. The two figures depicted by the U shapes enter the scene from different directions and different worlds, but it is here that their worlds collide. The woman on the left with her bucket, and to the right, Jesus complete with hidden living water. The painting includes what looks like seeds, but it's Jesus planting seeds of faith and imparting life to this woman. The green in the painting reflects the new life, which springs forth through Jesus, and the small white dots throughout the painting show the Holy Spirit at work in this encounter. There's probably a lot more that we're missing here, but it's a beautiful painting that tells the story from John 4. And I think it's really amazing how these artists can convey such deep theological meaning through imagery.
Yeah, Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for being part of Bible Society and helping these projects grow and find their way out into our bookshops for us. Thank you so much, David. I should have also mentioned that this beautiful book also comes with a handy key of being able to read the symbols at the back so that we can interpret this visual map. And essentially it sort of acts like a map through the Bible narrative and guides you through via the images that the Indigenous illustrators have created. So it's a wonderful journey to have together with perhaps your children and others who'd appreciate that. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. I wanted to turn then to Sarah and your book, which is wonderful and gorgeous. I studied history, yay, as an undergrad student, so this was music to my ears, and I kind of wish I had read your story and this book when I was 20-something and trying to figure out how to be a Christian and also be a historian and a nerd at the same time. The subtitle of your book is that we are priests of history stewarding the past in an ahistoric age. What does being ahistoric look like? I'm not sure that we think of ourselves as being necessarily ahistoric. Would you like to explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think we're living in a cultural moment now which is basically a moment of rootlessness and disconnection. And that's what I mean by being ahistorical, in the sense that we have, for example, a sense that, what is the good life? It's basically a life in which you go out and invent yourself. It's a life of self-fulfillment. So why is history relevant to that? So there's a kind of sense that history is kind of irrelevant.
Yes.
There's also, I think, a kind of sense that we are profoundly ignorant of history increasingly, in the sense that I'm not sure that we know too much, and I mean sort of both outside, but also increasingly, I think, inside the church too. I'm not sure that we know that much about our history, where we've come from, and where we're going and how to make sense of that meaningfully. And finally, I think also the other tendency of ahistoricism, I think, is that we tend to reduce history to culture wars and ideology. And this is such a sad thing, but that tends to be what happens when we have public discussions about history. And yet, what I sort of wanted to do with the book is not just kind of identify that ahistoricism of our culture, but also, because I'm writing this as a Christian, of course, point to the fact that, gosh, we have a God who acts in history. We're adopted into a historical people. So how can we steward this past in a way that can help us ground ourselves and also communicate the gospel in such a rootless age?
That's fantastic. What do we, and I'm thinking about, I'm a historian, I love history, but not everybody is going to be able to connect in the same way. And I think particularly, for example, of my dad. So he is a Christian, and his history isn't necessarily rooted in a Christian past. It's rooted in an Asian past. So I guess two questions. What do we lose when we don't connect with history? And what are some practical steps to help us engage with history?
Yeah. Well, look, when we don't engage with history, you lose all manner of the richness of the past. And of course, just, when you mentioned your dad, I don't have a Christian background in my particular family either, but the wonderful thing about being adopted into God's people is you're actually adopted into that historical people. Yeah. And of course, because God's sovereign creator of the whole world, actually when you steward the past, you're actually stewarding the past of all traditions and all countries. Yep. You're trying to recover those sort of conversations. So so you lose the richness of the past, in the sense that you lose that kind of understanding of the ideas and the debates and the institutions, the things that have formed us. That was the first. So, and what was the second part of your question?
That was a fantastic answer as well. And I was thinking about it because it sort of, these two books in conversation with each other is actually incredibly rich and rewarding, because it's a unique heritage, but yet all of it is ours by virtue of being God's people in God's world. Yeah. So that's a real gift, I think, as well. I guess how do we practically engage with history as contemporary 20, 25-something Australian Christians? I watch a lot of Netflix. I don't read that much anymore, if I'm really honest. I have a busy life. What can I do?
Okay. Gosh, all kinds of things. Yes, of course, history is in books, but history is also in the material and culture all around us. History is in buildings, history is in artefacts, and history is in the stories that we pass down through the generations. So I would, of course, like my first suggestion, of course, is always, start reading, because reading is awesome. And read books that you wouldn't normally read. Read old books from other cultures, and but I think also just open yourself up, I guess, to the kind of the stories that are contained in the material culture and the art and the history and the culture of others, and also others in the church.
Yeah, paying attention, looking at the world, which has been a theme, I think, throughout tonight, from the poetry that the teen awards have been writing, but also a lot of the books have encouraged us to really pay attention, see our neighbour and see the world that we live in. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I wanted to end, Sarah, by asking you to tell me what's history done for you, so to speak. Sounds like a paraphrase of Monty Python, what has the Romans ever done for us? But part of this book, and the thing that I love about this book is that there's a weaving of so many stories and so many ideas, both thinking about ahistoricism, as it were, but also you include this beautiful section that is your testimony, a historian's testimony, which is just gorgeous and glorious. Do you want to sort of just give our audience a little bit of a glimpse of your relationship with history and how history and faith has sort of come together in your life?
Thank you. Well, gosh, I couldn't even answer that question without talking about the fact that I didn't grow up a Christian, didn't come from a Christian family. And so I always wanted to be a historian from the age of 9 because I loved the Middle Ages and I love medieval castles and I love those stories. But the thing is that ultimately anyway, there's a faith story I won't sort of go into.
You have to read the book to get the full story. It's okay.
But so while I was fascinated with story, I guess I had no kind of sense of why history ultimately mattered. And I suppose the short answer to that question is that now that I'm a Christian, what I understand about history is that God has created us as his people. He's adopted me into a historical people, and that enables me to understand world history in a whole new way. And I think, in terms of my own conversion, I've reflected a lot upon this, but I think, it was one thing to persuade me that the truth of the gospel, but I think in many ways history actually persuaded me of the beauty and the goodness, not just the truth, but the beauty and goodness of the Lord Jesus and of his world.
That's gorgeous, yeah. I think one of the Czech poets used to say, beauty will save the world. And so to be able to, as Christians, reclaim beauty, whether it's in our preaching or our history, our visual texts that we can also share in modern genre theory as well, it's a real gift. So thank you for that. Andy, this is your book, Modern Genre Theory. It's a great book. I also particularly like your endorsement or your acknowledgement at the front. Go and have a read of it. It'll make you laugh. I had a couple of different questions, but actually, I was talking to one of our volunteers as we were setting up, and I said, which of the 10 books interests you, Chris? I don't know if he's around. And he said, I really like the look of this modern genre theory book, but I don't understand what genre means. What is genre theory, he said. Ask Andy. And how is it different from literary theory?
You sure he wasn't mistaking it for Rob's book, The Transgender Theory?
No.
Sure,
I know
checking.
We've got a Smith and a Smith, but no, he was really for this book.
So what's a genre theory?
Yeah, what is genre theory?
To answer that, I'll go back to the beginning of the night when we had a bunch of excellent excerpts from a whole bunch of different, very talented teen and young Australian authors. And as I was sitting there, I was just thinking, isn't it wonderful that they're not all the same thing? You've got poetry, there was historical fiction, there was narrative, And that got me thinking, well, isn't that wonderful that God hasn't given us the one thing in the Bible? Now, genre theory you don't need when you're reading something written by someone who's alive now, normally. I mean, we understood that they were doing poetry and not a cooking recipe, that it was historical fiction, not a parking ticket. You can kind of work your way around because this is our culture. We're speaking English, but also we're in the same culture, so we understand what a poem is, hopefully. When we travel into a different culture, we have to be more self-aware. And we have to be aware that we're going into someone else's home. This is not where we live. I'm not an ancient Israelite. This is not my first language. And so genre theory is about thinking that kind of next thought about how do these genres work and how do I know that I'm reading the parking ticket as a parking ticket and the poem as a poem and not vice versa. Because if you get genres mixed up, you are like 2 Bible studies away from starting a cult in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, because you pick up the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, and you take that as straightforward prophecy, and you will be on YouTube with your own channel within weeks. And that's why genre theory is important, because we have to think clearly and critically about how we're reading. What is this thing I'm reading? A question you don't have to ask with these excellent normal books, but we do have to ask with foreign old books like the Bible.
Fantastic. Great. Yes. Try not to start a cult where, if you can help it, is a great lesson to learn from this book. I guess thinking about the genres of the Bible, 2-part question again, because I'm greedy. Okay. What is one genre that we are most likely to get wrong? And what is one genre that actually comes quite naturally to us from that perspective?
Yeah, I'll start with the easy one. So a letter. We know how a letter works. I receive letters from people, normally emails now, but letters. So when we read an epistle of Paul to Timothy, we kind of understand what that's for. So I don't want to make it sound like the Bible is this totally foreign universe where they're a different species. So we do pick up, they write their name at the top of the letter and at the bottom of the level, Paul to Titus, but we can kind of work our way around that. So I think letters we're pretty cool with. Apocalypses, I mentioned before. I think we know we're reading something weird, but I think the ones that we really have to watch out for are the ones that we think we know how they work. And narrative is the one where we get in trouble all the time. Now you think, I've been telling and reading stories since I was a small person, Andrew. What are you saying? Christians often read Hebrew narrative, expecting them to tell, not show. To explain everything and to make clear moral judgments. So I had a taxi driver once say, that Bible's a terrible book. All the heroes in it keep doing terrible things. How can you follow this book? You've got Abraham, who's sort of like 1 minute man of faith, next minute doing terrible things in Egypt with his wife. It's because we're not used to their style of storytelling. And I think they're the most dangerous genres where we think we know the rules, but we don't.
That's great. Talk to me about genre within genre. What happens when there's like things that are embedded in other texts of the Bible that sort of have 2 or 3 genres kind of all mushed together? Is there a way of going through it or breaking it apart or engaging with it?
Genre inception. It's it happens a lot. So genres, this is one of the things that we need to think about genre for. People used to assume that every book has one genre. Once you put it there, you know what to do with it. But actually, literature loves genres upon genres. They layer up. And so you have, in a narrative, characters will break out into song. And that's a whole genre, like a song within a narrative. And
like a musical, but
or
text.
A friend of mine, that's right. A friend of mine pointed out that Jesus uses riddles a lot. And the fact that he's using a riddle is actually super interesting. It's not all one thing. And I think that's the wonderful thing. I teach the Bible for a living. I teach at Ridley College. I teach people to read the Old Testament carefully. And the genres within genres within genres is so much fun to play with. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Final question for you, Andy. So I'm leading a Bible study tomorrow night. I pick up your book. How do I use it in a way in 24 hours or less than that so that my Bible study tomorrow might be useful and to the point and honour the Bible but also honour the people that I am leading?
Well, if you're not as quick a reader as Bei-En is, because I know you're a very, very good reader, you love reading. I think for most people, having a sense of curiosity, I think, is the biggest tip. I try to get across in the book. When you travel to another country with a bad traveller, it's tiresome, right? When they get off the plane, they're just not curious about the culture. They're just complaining about the food smelling funny, and they all drive on the wrong side of the road and they speak funny. And that kind of attitude of lack of curiosity, I think, is bad for travelling, but it's also bad for reading the Bible. And so I think if you had one thing overnight, you're not doing Revelation tomorrow, are you? No, good. Is just to have a sense of curiosity. Like, how does this thing work? And when something doesn't seem to fit, that's gold, because that's prompting you to go back and have a think.
That's brilliant. A sense of curiosity, I think, really is something that joins all three of these lovely books that I have in my lap. Curious about how people have lived, how Christians have lived and suffered and worked out how to be Christians wherever they are and how that connects with us. Curiosity about things that you read in the Bible 1,000,001 times and maybe need to rethink again. And curious about how the Bible communicates to a culture and a people that are not us, and what riches can we gain from it if we look over their shoulder and see these images as Pitjantjatjara Indigenous people will see them. 3 books that are highly recommended from me, as are all the other books that we have been shortlisting tonight. Thank you so much, very much, for your books, your time and your words. Thank you.